You're live.
Good evening, everybody. I understand the feed is up live now. We've checked out WebEx already. It is 7:02 p.m. And I'd like to call to order the regular monthly meeting of the Mahomet-Seymour Board of Education. It's 7:02 p.m. Monday, the 21st of September. I'd like to remind everyone at this time who's attending in person to sign in and silence your cell phones. If you'd like to make comments to the board this evening, please read the visitor guidelines, fill out an orange sheet and get those right away to Dawn. Could we have roll call, please?
Giles.
Here.
Keith.
Here.
Hendricks.
Here.
Schultz.
Here.
Larson.
Here.
Hennessy.
Here.
McComb.
Here. Stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. You may be seated. Board members, you have seen the agenda for tonight's meeting. There's some important items on tonight's agenda. Many of them are items we've discussed before. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as it's presented?
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
The discussion on the agenda?
Max, I had asked about moving the COVID discussion up out of respect.
We do have some guests here that need to present, I think, and be on their way. So I think that's kind of why it is where it is. Dr. Hall, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Hope Wheeler's with us, and that's why it's top of the agenda. After that, I suppose the budget could go to number 3 and or
2.
yeah.
Budget
It doesn't make
go
any difference to me.
Okay,
But I would
So
like Mrs. Wheeler to go first.
we'll let Hope go first, and then if the board's okay with it, we'll move the COVID update school plan to agenda item 2, if that's all right with all the board members.
So
That sounds good.
becomes 2.
Both got Pat on.
Okay?
We do have Patrick waiting too.
Yes.
Yeah, we do have Patrick waiting also. Okay, any other thoughts on the agenda? We have a roll call vote to approve the agenda, please.
Larson.
Yes.
Hendricks.
Yes.
Giles.
Yes.
Hennessy.
Yes.
Keith.
Yes.
Schultz.
Yes.
McComb.
Yes, and at this time, are there any more public participation sheets anywhere? Okay, very good. Consent agenda. Board members, you've had a chance to review the consent agenda. It includes minutes from previous meetings, bills to be paid, the treasurer's report, personnel changes, the required EIS administrator teacher salary and benefit report, and some disposition of surplus items. Would anyone like to remove any of those items from the consent agenda for individual discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved. Larson.
Larson, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion on consent agenda? Roll call vote, please.
Hennessy.
No.
Schultz.
No.
Keith.
No.
Giles.
Yes.
Hendricks.
Yes.
Larson.
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. Dr. Hall, donations.
Thank you. We have a donation from Mahomet-Seymour Boys Basketball Association to the junior high, a cash donation of $1,000. And a donation from the United Way of Champaign County and the Community Foundation of East Central Illinois to the school district, donation of $2,500, which was a grant for school supplies for a total of $3,500 this month. So thank you to everybody. We appreciate that, and certainly appreciate the help with school supplies.
Okay. The superintendent recommends we approve the donations as they are presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
I think was that Colleen?
I think so.
It was.
Second?
Second from Hennessy.
All right. Discussion on donations. Roll call vote, please.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. All right, it's communication time. And at this time, is there anyone here from the PTO with anything to present? MSEA. Yes. Almost didn't see back and forth.
You want to push that button? Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, good evening. I'm Megan Jones, co-president of the MSEA along with James Heinold. As the educational professionals entrusted with the education of our community's children, Mahomet-Seymour Education Association is in support of continuing to use the current hybrid plan to teach our students. As we have said all along, we are eager for the day when a vaccine or a cure for COVID-19 allows us to return to school as normal. But that day is not here yet. In the interest of our students, the Mahomet-Seymour staff, and our community, we remain opposed to a full return to in-person instruction. All of the reasons for starting school this year with a hybrid plan that mixes in-person instruction with remote instruction continue to exist. COVID-19 continues to be present in our area. Epidemiologists, the Illinois Department of Health, the Illinois State Board of Education, and the CDC continue to warn us of the danger of COVID-19 and advise us to take precautions. Those precautions continue to include social distancing that we cannot achieve if all students and staff are present. Classrooms, hallways, lunchrooms, and bathrooms continue to be too small to maintain adequate social distancing if all students come back for in-person instruction. Having all the students in person at the same time makes the difficult job of maintaining student mask usage even harder and non-compliance more likely. Having all students in person at the same time makes it harder for students to access sinks for hand washing, similarly discouraging compliance. And full days at school in the absence of normal recess, normal lunch, and normal schedules continues to not be developmentally appropriate for elementary students, and in particular, most likely diminishing any educational gains we hope to realize with a longer day. The above are reasons for starting the school year with a hybrid plan. These reasons continue to exist, and now there are two more significant reasons. While our county positivity rate is quite low, as of today, there were still 347 active cases in Champaign County, which is a much higher number of active cases than it was all summer when at its peak, active cases didn't hit 250. All expert advice points to the fact that with cooler weather, COVID-19 will become more prevalent. The risk to students, staff, and community only increases as the temperatures drop. For these reasons, the membership of the MSEA has overwhelmingly indicated their belief that the best course of action under the current circumstances is to continue the hybrid plan. Our survey of the MSEA members show that 74% of staff do not feel safe reopening with full enrollment on October 1st. As those with firsthand knowledge of how well this plan has worked in practice, we can speak with authority in recommending the hybrids plan continued use. As we have said from the beginning, we are willing to accept the risk to our health and safety presented by working during the pandemic, but only in a context where all reasonable mitigation of that risk has been undertaken. The hybrid plan provides that reasonable mitigation. Arguments that point to the still preliminary evidence that contracting COVID-19 is a relatively minor concern for school-aged children are inadequate. Even if that does prove true, it does not change the fact that children can transmit the virus quite effectively to staff members working for the district, as well as our community members when they go home. Furthermore, from an educational standpoint, while time with the students is shorter due to hybrid plan scheduling, smaller grouping of students does provide advantages in terms of more concentrated and individualized attention. MSEA continues to insist, therefore, that the only safe and reasonable course of action for the Mahomet-Seymour School District is to continue to use the current hybrid plan as recommended by Dr. Hall and our district nurse, Leah Bachman. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you, Megan. Anyone from speaking on behalf of the foundation tonight?
Yes, it's me. Okay, so this is from Tammy Marsh, the co-president of the foundation. And so because of COVID-19, they were not able to have their annual Bulldog Bash, which normally brings in about $70,000 to $80,000. So this week they are going to meet with the annual campaign committee because typically by the end of the year, the foundation awards $20,000 in grants, which they're looking at their budget to see how that is going. So just be cognizant if you are thinking about things to be involved in, that the Education Foundation is a not-for-profit that puts money right back into our classrooms with our educators, and they're hitting a deficit too due to COVID. That's the update from the foundation.
Visitors, Dawn, do we have any on WebEx tonight?
Not that I know of.
I've got 3 in person that wish to speak, and first is Camden Wood. Camden, thank you. Go right over to the podium. You can, if you'd like to pull your mask down while you speak, you can. I'd like to remind everybody you've got a maximum of 5 minutes. Dawn will time it and will warn you if you get within a minute. Thanks, Camden.
Good evening. My name is Camden Wood. I'm a 7th grader at Mahomet-Seymour Junior High School. My family and I moved from Texas to Mahomet in 2017. I play soccer and run cross country. I wanted to come here tonight to give you some insight into my experiences with both virtual and in-person learning so far this year. I chose the in-person option initially. When I got to school, I was very surprised to find out that my teachers were also teaching virtually at the same time. I was sitting in my classroom being forced to wear a mask while my teachers would take up to 15 minutes to take attendance for the virtual students. There were many other inconveniences due to the rules and regulations, but there seemed to be no upside. After 2 weeks, I switched to full-time virtual. Unfortunately, virtual learning now is almost worse than it was in the spring. Obviously, the amount of instruction you get virtually is less than what it would be during a normal in-person class. But that's just the beginning of the issues. One of the biggest problems I am encountering is that I'm just sitting at my desk for over half of the school day with nothing to do. My school day does not even start until 9:30 2 days of the week and 10:05 the other 2 days of the week. Every day, school ends at 2:37. During that time, I am required to check in by answering an attendance question about every 30 minutes. After attendance, most teachers only instruct for a couple of minutes before signing off, while other teachers don't virtually present themselves at all. They simply post a worksheet and instructions in the Google Classroom. I'm usually able to finish my assignments within the first 5 to 10 minutes of class. This has become very irritating for me because then I have to sit around waiting to sign in for my next class about 20 minutes later. In my opinion, if the teachers were just going to post work and not instruct, it would be more beneficial to me and my time if I could just complete my work and move on with my day instead of having to log on every 30 minutes. When a teacher does present to the virtual classroom, you can see all the virtual students and not just the teacher. Most of the time, there are classmates who are dancing, logging on with other accounts to disrupt the presentation, or doing several other distracting things to try and be fun. As you can tell, there seems to be no good option right now if your goal is quality education. If we aren't going back to a full in-person learning soon, I feel like we should look for some other ideas to improve the quality of learning. I think a better solution would have been to structure the classes differently. In my opinion, it would have made sense if the teachers were either teaching in person or virtually during each class period. For example, a teacher may teach the first and second period virtually and the third and fourth period in person, and so on. Would that not have been more effective for everyone? It certainly would have been less distracting for students and easier on teachers. Instead, with the current structure, I feel that the teachers at junior high are being asked to shoot 2 jobs at once. They are managing kids in the classroom, managing students online, being asked to instruct virtually while wearing a mask because there are other students in the classroom at the same time, making sure kids in the class are wearing their masks, etc. I understand that the district have tough decisions to make regarding the return to school, but but I feel really bad for our secondary teachers that are having to keep up with this routine on a daily basis. I'm proud to be a Bulldog, but I know we can do better as a community for our teachers and students. I wanted to share my personal experience with you, and I understand this may not be the experience others are having. My hope would be for the schools to open up full time and go back to our normal schedule. I miss being at school. I miss being able to form relationships with my teachers, administrators, and classmates. I miss all of the hands-on experiences that you can't do virtually or in person this year due to the restrictions. I'm ready to go back to a normal in-person schedule, and I beg to have that be an option. If any of the school board members or administrators would be willing to come to my house to sit with me through a school day, I would be happy to host you. I think this would be a really good way for you to see what it is like on a daily basis. Thank you for your time.
Camden, thank you for sharing.
So much.
Okay, next is Martin McFarland.
Thank you very much. My name is Martin McFarland. I'm a parent in the district. I have 3 children in first grade, 4th grade, and 6th grade. And I'm here primarily simply to state my thanks and appreciation for the teachers in the school district. As I said, I'm one of hundreds that you'll hear from who moved to this area because of the reputation of the schools. And in the 5 years I've lived here, that reputation has been proven more than deserved because of the dedication of the teachers. This year more than ever, they've had to deal with constantly changing lesson plans, delivery methods, communication processes, often with little to no warning, and they've done it phenomenally because they're experts in the field. And so therefore, I would urge the school board to listen to the teachers for that very reason. They're the experts here. They're the ones with degrees in education. They're the ones in the classroom every day. And too often we can run the risk of thinking just of the children and the parents. And look, I get that. I think of my children and what is best for them. I hear you. This situation sucks. I want my kids back in the classroom full time. Absolutely. But children are not taught by machines. They're taught by people whose opinion and feelings cannot and should not be dismissed. Already we've asked them to go into a working environment of questionable safety, and when other school districts have not. And because our teachers are fantastic, they've done it, and they've adapted. But in a recent survey by the teachers, by their union, vast majority stated they do not wish the current operations plan for fall to change mid-semester. And so if we go against their recommendations, what are we saying? We're effectively saying, we know better than you, so your opinion and knowledge doesn't matter. We know better than you, so your health and safety doesn't matter. And if the teacher's opinions, knowledge, health and safety don't matter, then really, we should just come out and say that our teachers are extinct. And I don't think anyone wants to say that. I don't think anyone here has the hubris to say that we know better. So I would just please encourage you, not just this year, but especially this year, when considering changes to school operations, please listen to the teachers. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Mark, you. You with me?
Ready.
Okay. And Brook Starks.
Good evening. My name is Brook Starks. I have a sophomore in high school and an 8th grade student for context. And I'm here tonight to plead with the school board to allow in-person learning for 4 out of 5 days a week. I fear that we have made the measure of success for school year 2021, whether or not we are mitigating COVID. And while that is an important and critical measure that is imposed on us by powers higher than the school board, I want to also remind you as school board members that you were elected to represent the interests of we in this community and our children. And while their safety and health is one of those things with which you are charged, the utmost charge you have is to assure their education. What I do not hear being asked, pardon me, what I do not hear being asked is whether this system currently in place is actually working for us. I cannot speak to the lower grade levels, but I can speak to junior high and high school. And what I don't hear is us being asked whether we believe that our children are actually learning and being educated to the level required. Many of us in Mahomet, as we've already heard, moved to Mahomet for the quality of education provided. On the whole, if I may generalize, I find Mahomet to be an educated, informed, and participatory community of parents. Therefore, please rest assured that those who are in my vote understand the risks associated with COVID. We accept and acknowledge that COVID is a real virus with real implications for students. There's no such thing as a cure for a virus, so that's not attainable. Teachers and our community are at risk. We understand the data. We've looked at the science. We read your reports. Please stop trying to explain to us and instead hear us when we tell you that in spite of all those serious factors, and they are serious, the lack of education that our children in junior high and high school are presently receiving right now under this system is more dire than the risks that are proposed by putting the kids back in school together. Please don't mistake me to be bashing our teachers. I believe our teachers are working their tails off, harder than ever. They are putting in hours way beyond anything they could have comprehended. Unfortunately, the system doesn't work well. Statements heard in my house in the last week since I listened to your study session last Monday and started taking notes. What's wrong with me? Why can't I learn? I was positive I understood the material and I still failed the test. I couldn't get logged in and all the instructions were given in the first part of class, and so I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. I didn't realize there was an assignment. I did the assignment, but the assignment wouldn't submit, and so I got an F. I don't understand. I'm going to fail. I don't know how we can be expected to learn. It's one thing in the classroom and a different thing outside of the classroom, and I'm just confused. Again, I reiterate that I do believe our teachers are doing the very best they can. However, this hybrid model is a very ad hoc system that is insufficient to address the needs of our children. I have honor roll and high honor roll students who are failing multiple classes across the board because the system is unsustainable for them. I ask that you ask us if it's working. As their parents, I do believe I'm the expert in that critical piece of knowledge. Assume that we've made ourselves aware of the risks and issues, and that yet we are telling you that the lack of education, the struggles our children are having, and the damage being irreparably done to them is worse. I ask you to approve in-person school 4 days a week, allowing our teachers a planning day on the 5th day because they still have a quarter of the district learning remotely and they need that. And stop telling ourselves we're doing a good job because we're managing our COVID cases. And instead, put education as a measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke.
Okay, John, that's all I have, is that right? Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for their input. In addition to the folks that spoke, we received how many emails? 38 emails. Those emails have went to all of our board members, and we've had a chance to read those prior to coming in tonight. So thank you, everybody, for all your thoughts and your input. At this time, we've got a chance for some communication from our board members, and we'll start with Ken. Are you out there, Ken?
Thank you. I have just a brief report tonight. I just wanted to let the staff members know that are currently struggling with COVID right now that you're forefront in my mind, and I hope you recover quickly. That's my report. Thank you.
Okay. Megan?
I don't have anything tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Colleen?
I, first of all, would like to echo what Ken said. I have been thinking and keeping in my prayers those staff members that are struggling with COVID right now. The other thing I wanted to say is this week I was reading the book Jurassic Park, and in this book there was a part where they're explaining the safety protocols, and the main character replies to the people, life will find a way, when they think it's not going to happen. And all I could think this whole week is teachers will find a way, right? In this book, it's a very difficult situation, but our teachers are rising to the challenges that we are putting before them. And this situation is so difficult for everyone, including them. And I know they're finding ways to connect and educate our kids. And even when they're asked to do something that is virtually impossible, they are finding a way. And so I just want to say thank you to all of our teachers and our support staff for all the hard work they've been putting in, and say that I really appreciate you. Thanks.
Thank you, Colleen. Merle.
I would just echo the sentiments, thanks to everybody. It's a lot of hands on deck to make this thing happen, from the students to the teachers, to the administrators, to other staff, and just thank you to everybody.
Jeremy?
Similar thoughts. Appreciate all the efforts that have gone in from our administrators and from Nita as well, and all the work that she's put in, and our teachers, and it's just a difficult task. One, for our teachers trying to balance in-person classroom, and also at the same time trying to work with those remote learners. And as we can see, I think it's asking almost too much of them to be able to do both of those things. I'm concerned right now that we're losing, or on the precipice of losing, a year or more than a year in some of our students' education. And that's what we're really tasked with as a school board.
Well, I work in education, so I'm around it all the time, and I am part of a co-op that serves 10 districts where there is some in-person instruction going on, and I appreciate all of our staff here. The concern that I have that comes as my board member comment is I've read a lot of emails, I've talked to people, I've met with a lot of people, I've talked to teachers, of which I consider myself to be a teacher. I was talking to my mom tonight, and I was the only girl in my family, and I was the baby, and I said to my mom, did I have the vaccine for chickenpox? I had it. But in the 8th grade, I came out, I broke out, it was terrible. There wasn't a body part on me that didn't have a pox, and was very humiliated when I went back to school because I looked bad. But you know what? I had it. I had a vaccine to prevent it from happening, yet I had it. I've had good health care my whole life, and I've had cancer. And I'm still here. And I just worry that exactly what Dr. Hendrick said and others, that I have a child who I've sent from our school to college. I have kids, I have little neighbor kids that I watch all the time. And we're here for a purpose, and we're not able to do that because of fear. There is no forecast in sight that this is going anywhere. We cannot just lay down and be content. That's my comment.
Thank you, everybody. I've just got a couple thoughts I want to share tonight. First, tonight, we had one of our town hall meetings. We've had 2 of those so far. One tonight before this board meeting at Mahomet-Methodist Church, and then one last Monday night before last Monday night's meeting at the Seymour Methodist Church. They were outside. Of course, these were our meetings to work with our U of I folks and lead discussions on equity, diversity, and inclusion in our school district. We had good participation both nights. I know from the board standpoint, Ken and Megan were both there for both those meetings. I've been at both the meetings so far. I appreciate them being there. I know we've got other board members that plan to make some of the remaining meetings. There's one more, I think, out at Candlewood, and then we're going to do a virtual meeting. Moving forward, of course, this is part of our work to lay the groundwork. We're working on our staff and helping to change the culture in our district and our buildings when it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I just appreciate everybody who's come out to have a part in this. The goal is to change from within, okay? We could pass some edict from the board that talks about diversity and inclusion, but frankly, that's been done before. And if simple mandates could solve these issues in America, they'd have been solved a long time ago, in my opinion. So we've got some hard work ahead of us, and it involves working with our staff and our district employees. And really, as someone mentioned tonight, it's got to be a community effort. You know, I think we're going to take the lead as it comes to Mahomet-Seymour schools, but to change a community, you've got to have the community on board. So thanks to all those that have come out and helped with that to this point. Also tonight, you know, it's no secret, we're going to talk about our back to school plan, and we have, as a board, received a tremendous amount of feedback. And we have heard folks who, you know, you heard 3 speakers tonight, and they had different things to say about it. I'm not sure what the email count is right now, Dawn. It's a couple hundred probably over the last couple of weeks. And everyone's got different approaches and different thoughts. Certainly, there's lots of diverse views. One thing I want everyone to know is everybody is being heard. Okay, people say, I want to be heard. We are listening. We are reading what you're saying. We're looking at the sources you're sending. We get all that. You know, we live in a country right now, I think, where some people think, I know I was heard because if I was heard, they'll agree with me. Well, this is a situation where we've got all kinds of voices coming from all kinds of different directions with all kinds of approaches. There is no one path forward that as a community we're going to agree on. It's just not fair. So tonight we're going to choose a path forward, and I want you to know that if that path forward we choose is different than what you would like it to be, it's not because you haven't been heard. It's not because you're not valued. It's not because we don't understand your position. It's because as a group, we had to choose a path, and we're going to choose whichever path we think is best for our district. So, and we might, as a community, it's clear we don't all agree on it, okay? So I just want to share that. Don't think just because the path is not the path you chose, that doesn't mean you've not been heard, because we are listening and we have heard. That's all I've got.
Thanks, Max.
I'm sorry?
She said, thank you, Max.
Yeah.
Thank you, Max.
Yeah, you're welcome. Next, it is, I guess it's Heather's turn. Hi, Heather.
Good evening, Dr. Hall and Board. Tonight I'll just give a short financial update. I'm sure you guys looked at the reports. Basically, we are down in revenue to the budget right now, the preliminary budget, but that is because the county treasurer is about a month behind on his payments, and we still haven't even received one for September. So I'm going to be budgeting them on a regular basis so that we can get up to date with those payments. Our expenses are right in line with our preliminary budget, so we're doing good there. Again, the village is also having some issues with the treasurer as well. They're not getting the information to be able to distribute the TIF payments. So what they've decided is they're gonna go ahead and distribute them based off of what was paid out last year. And then if they have to reconcile later, they will do that. So we should start seeing TIF payments come in shortly. Also, I just want to, as you probably already noticed, and I know it's not time for the budget, but I just want to let you know, I want to thank Dr. Rummel and Mr. Lynn, because they were awarded a $209,000 grant for technology. And what that did is you'll see that in my latest budget update, that decreased the operational deficit by $209,000, because what we're going to do is, Nicole's reached out to the principals to see if there's any technology they bought for COVID or anything to move that to there, but then also take on some of the Chromebooks and everything that we put in the ESSER grant, because it can only cover technology. So the good news is that frees up money so that we can get reimbursed fully for PPE and for cleaning supplies and other things like that we may have only been reimbursed 75% for through the FEMA grant. So that was wonderful, and now, that basically put us down to a $110,000 deficit in operational funds, which I'm hoping we will not have. So I just wanted to thank them, because I know they put a lot of work into it. They had to do it twice, because the state changed their mind.
Thanks.
But anyway, so that is it. Does anybody have any questions?
I got one. When does ESSA money run out? End of September? Is that when's the last time you can apply for it?
Apply for what?
Is there a timeline on the ESSA money?
The ESSER, the relief fund?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not until, after this year is over.
Okay.
So, what I do is I'm continuing to update that grant, basically do amendments as we go along. Like, I had actually stopped Dr. Hall from approving an amendment I made the other day just because, Dr. Rummel informed me that there might be some technology that we put in there instead of the PPE or so it'll continue to be amended so that we can get as much money as possible.
Okay. Thanks.
Do we have any thoughts of thinking about perhaps other ways we could, other technologies that could help us with our learning? Like, just as an example, maybe larger screen TVs or monitors or something for the classrooms. I know some of the teachers struggle to see all of their students that are remote simultaneously, and maybe a larger screen might help with that, or things like that. Do we ever consider getting the grant money and using it for some of those technology items?
We can always look at it. What we've done so far is try to decrease the deficit with the unknown of COVID, instead of replacing things that we've already paid for or are going to have to pay for in the grant. But I mean, it's always something that we can look at, and just knowing that it will cost us more money because we won't really have that reimbursement.
The technology grant that Jared and I wrote for is very specific. It has to be used for students. Can only purchase student devices with that. So we used it to cover the devices purchased for MPE. And then you can use it to cover the hotspot Wi-Fi monthly fee. So it's very limited in what that you can use that grant for.
But I appreciate it. It made me very happy.
Well, I think that's a good point. Maybe the next thing for Jared to work on is what do we need that we don't have now to make things better. Okay. Any other questions for Heather? No, we'll hear more from Heather after a little bit. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We've got reports tonight from Christine Northup and from Dr. Rummel. Next up is Christine and her report.
I don't know if Christine is with us this evening in the meeting, but her report is contained in the board packet, and this is from her and our coordinator of student services, Marissa Hill. And this is just kind of an added feature to the agenda of the report from Mrs. Northrop and Mrs. Hill, and also hearing from Dr. Rummel in just a minute. But just to keep the board updated on what's going on in their department. So I don't know if there's anything really big news in there, but just more along the lines of what's going on in their world right now.
I know I appreciate the information that was in that report. I don't think board members have any questions on that. Okay, so we'll move on to Dr. Rummel.
I believe you've covered a good portion of my report, Max, with the update, so thank you for that. The only other piece I'll touch on is just professional development. We've been providing the staff on Mondays. It's been very well received. They have to, in order to get PD hours that they need for their recertification, they have to complete an evaluation following each Monday's professional development, and the feedback has been very positive on that. There's a choice board in the morning that's related to technology. Some of those are pre-recorded events, some of those are live events, and they have an opportunity to implement the strategies that they've learned. And in the afternoon is it's part of our social and emotional learning focus. As I think many of you know, this is part of our journey that we've been on well before I came here, when we started talking about trauma. And it's just been something that's been ongoing. And so today's afternoon training focused specifically on bias, but also focused on providing teachers with some strategies on some ways that we can support LGBTQ students in our district. So it's very, very good professional development. We'll continue focusing. We're going to be working throughout the course of the year on a book called Culture, Class, and Race. And just providing us some strategies to have some dialogue and to create honest conversations to move the district forward.
Okay. And was there anything on the diversity and equity piece that I didn't cover that you did?
I think you got, you pretty much.
I didn't want to steal your report from you.
No, that's good. We will, when Dr. Carter Black is able, she'll come and will present to us on the other part of that diversity training, and we'll talk a little bit about class and race.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Romo?
Do we have a current staff member qualified to teach the computer science class, or will we need to hire someone?
Great question. We do. You have to be certified in math in the state of Illinois, in math or computer science to teach that course. And we'll have a presentation from the math department next month.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anything else for Dr. Romo?
Thanks, Dr. Romo.
Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate it. Dr. Hall.
Right, just very briefly, on a positive note, Mahomet is this week's focus of WCIA's Our Town series, and that series looks a little bit different than it has in the past because of the pandemic, but they came out and did spend some time out here putting together stories on our freshman mentoring program, as well as the Give Me 5 food bag program, which our own Lori Larson oversees and coordinates. And so those will be on sometime this week. I don't know when. I guess it could have been this evening. But so just a nice showcase of those programs in our district. Also just wanted to acknowledge that we are aware that we've heard from some folks, and I know some board members have, about food quality, selection, and ordering with our food service provider, Arbor Management. Heather Smith and I have been working with them in conversation to just problem solve around those issues, and we think things that are on an upward trend there. So we appreciate everyone's patience. And also just want to remind everybody that all meals are free for all students and any resident in the Mahomet-Seymour district under the age of 18 until the end of December due to a waiver through the USDA. So we encourage folks to take advantage of that and are happy to serve them. And also just a thank you to everybody who came out to the town hall. Another just absolutely beautiful evening and great conversation, and just grateful for everybody's time.
So to be clear, there's no charge for any students right now for lunch.
True. Yes, correct.
I have a feeling my son would still be hitting me up for lunch.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good deal.
Is it, the next town hall is at the tennis court? That's the meeting spot, is that right? Candlewood?
Yes, yeah, it's at the end of McLean Street, and it is not on a Monday, it's on Wednesday, September 30th. So we invite everybody to come out to that.
Any other questions for Dr. Hall? Okay. Moving on, under new business, item 1, annual district audit. You know it's September when Hope comes to see us. Hope, thank you for being here.
I'm clearing the room.
I heard your spiel.
Karen has never filled in, rolling out.
Hope chases them out of the room.
Heather's working on getting the presentations pulled up on screen.
Is there a share screen?
Share and call.
Yes, share and call. Share in call.
There you go, there it is.
Yes, there we go.
Have you? Are you just gonna forward it for me?
And what?
Do you have you're just gonna roll it forward for me?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thanks for having me here tonight to present the results of the June 30, 2020 audit. My name is Hope Wheeler. I'm a principal at Clifton Larson Allen and live here in the district.
just to, I put together, there are several different reports that we issue as part of the audit process, so I put together this summary just to condense it, but feel free to jump in if you have any questions along the way. If you just, I think, page down, there you go. So quickly here, I'll go over the objectives. I'm going to give you a brief understanding of the audit process, discuss our deliverables, and then available for any questions. Our deliverables, as part of the process, are the financial statements for the fiscal year ended. You present them in the form of the annual financial report, or we call that the AFR, that ISBE requires from you each year. And then we also issue a report on government auditing standards and single audit. The single audit meaning your federal funding expenditures. Then we are required by our standards to issue a governance communication letter. As we work one-on-one with the management group here, we want to share certain items specifically with the governing board. And then as of last year, there was a new report called a Consolidated Year-End Financial Report, which we shortened to CIFER, that was required under the new Government Accountability and Transparency Act. So that gets submitted to the state of Illinois. We also, I didn't put on there, but we also issue a data collection form, or complete a data collection form, which also summarizes your federal expenditures for the year. The terms of the engagement, just briefly, are to express an opinion on that financial statement, that AFR that I mentioned, and then the government auditing standards report is a report on your internal controls and on compliance. And then we also give an opinion on your major federal expenditures or federal programs for the year. And then we summarize any audit findings and provide those here. Just to talk a little bit about the audit process, there obviously are hundreds, thousands of transactions during the year and different balances at year end. So we just do an overall snapshot, overall look at your financial activity for the year and determine using what we call a risk-based approach on what we're going to test, select samples. Certain procedures are required by auditing standards. Others, we have some professional judgment in how we're going to test. We've grouped here some of the areas that are focused based on our risk assessment, and then we spend a different amount of time on those depending on that risk level. But we always look at internal controls, so we'll select a sample and walk through certain internal control processes you have in place to make sure those are operating effectively. Cash and investments are a significant balance, of course, and that's something we have to confirm with an outside entity. So that's our main procedure there, and looking at the reconciliations. We also look at your capital asset purchases during the year, make sure those are properly capitalized for your AFR and recorded as capital outlay. Activity funds is of course a hot spot for school districts because those are typically handled a little bit differently under a different set of controls. Here you have them within your system, which is great. You don't always see that. So we do some sampling of those and testing of the activity funds. The uniform grant guidance, what that's referring to are those federal expenditures or the single audit that I mentioned. We pick a program each year. We test your major federal program, as you know, is your IDEA, special education funding. So we tested that program. We also look at long-term debt, your outstanding bonds, property tax revenues, we confirm those. And then federal and state revenues, we're able to confirm what you've received there or should have received from ISBE information. And then general disbursements and payroll expenses, that's categorize your two major expenses there, and we select samples and do internal control testing over those. To highlight the results of our audit for this fiscal year ended, we did give an opinion on that financial statement or AFR. It is an adverse opinion because it's not in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles or GAAP. It is, so we say it's not in accordance with GAAP. However, then we say it is an unmodified, no modifications to our opinion, or a clean opinion on the cash basis of accounting using ISBE's regulatory basis. Or once again, completing that AFR form, that's what ISBE wants to see. So that's what we're giving our opinion on, and that's a clean opinion in a long-winded way. Your government auditing standards report is also, that's the internal control and compliance report. That is an unmodified or clean opinion also. We do reference one finding in that report, which I'll go over. And then your single audit report or your federal report is on the special education program and the financial compliance requirements we look at. And that was an unmodified opinion and no findings were noted this year. Which is great because a lot of times we do find at least one finding or two findings in most single audits we do. So great that it was a completely clean audit this year in what we tested. The one finding I mentioned that's in that government auditing standards report is noted here. And that is on the overall that we prepared the financial statements for you and including the disclosures to be in accordance with the government auditing standards. And then there were some adjusting entries required just to make them in line with the way ISBE wants them in the AFR. And so that's reported as one finding, required to report that if you have us prepare the financial statements, and then just added that we did make some adjustments as part of that process.
So that's really nothing we have any control over.
I mean, you can choose to complete your own financial statement, hand that to us, and we would audit it. That's the perfect world.
Okay.
But in a lot of the smaller and medium-sized government entities and even for-profit entities, they do hire their auditor to complete that. And there is a review process over it. Heather reviewed it to look it over, make sure it matched up with your records, make sure everything made sense.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
You are welcome to. Governance communication, this letter highlights certain required communications we have with you as a governing board. If there were any significant new accounting policies adopted this year or new government accounting standards or GASBs, we'd share those in that letter. There wasn't anything of significance that affected the AFR form this year or the footnotes. No significant accounting estimates, especially when you're on the cash basis of accounting, you don't typically have accounting estimates that are significant like you would if you were on the full accrual basis. No difficulties with management or disagreements regarding auditing processes or accounting procedures. And I do want to share there that as we've been talking about all evening, it's been quite the unique year for all of us. It's right at the end of the fiscal year in those last few months, COVID. You also had the transition in your business manager. So I didn't really know how this audit was going to go. But overall, as you can see from my report here, it went really well. It was a smooth transition from my perspective in doing the audit and my team's perspective. So appreciate that and all the work, Heather, you started and jumped right into the audit process because we came out and did our interim procedures in April. So we started hitting her right away on understanding what's going on. So appreciate your work with us there. And then came back in July to do all the year-end procedures. And we were able to come out and try to maintain social distances. We did do some things electronically. I'm very good at using our portal and using technology. Other places we audit don't necessarily have everything as electronically as you guys already did. So that made it easier for us. And then the last is any adjustments we had as part of the audit process. Those are attached to that governance letter. That's all I had in summarizing the several different reports that you had in your packet there. I'll be able to try to answer any questions or can get back to you if you had a question that I can't answer tonight.
Other questions for Hope?
Hope, general question for you. You've done this, I think, as long as I've known you, so you've actually been able to see us for quite a while, and I appreciate your comments and kind thoughts about the transition and so forth. But in general, are these statements more complicated than they were 5 to 10 years ago? Is there just more to have to do either for us or for you or both?
Yeah. Overall, I mean, on being on the cash basis of accounting, it hasn't made it more complicated over the years necessarily. For full accrual basis, you've definitely seen more complications added there. And Heather was in a district that was full accrual, and there were a lot of new standards that affected those. The only thing that I can think of off the top of my head that's been some added is this new cipher report that I mentioned that GATA required. It's really taking the same numbers, putting them in a different format, and we have to give an opinion on that. So that takes an additional time and effort to understand what their limited instructions are and what they're looking for. And sometimes, occasionally there are new accounting standards that do impact you guys and the ASR that you issue.
And I'd like to thank Obe and Matt and her team, because they are always very helpful, not only at this time, but during the year. Because if anything changes or anything, I reach out to them right away to see how to do things, so they keep everybody in compliance all year long, so they do a great job.
Thank you. We're happy to do that too, because in the end, usually it benefits us at year end as we know what's going on and things look great.
I did notice that in one of the notes that there was a statement that property taxes are received approximately 30 days, and I'm thinking that was a kind cut and paste from last year or 2 years ago.
That's probably true. That hopefully said in general. I know we did talk about the timing of this, especially last year, really impacted you right in fiscal year, and especially being on the cash basis of accounting, which year they happen to fall into.
Any other questions for Hope? Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the 2019-2020 audit as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved, Larson.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion on the audit? Roll call vote, please, Donna.
Schultz,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes?
Hennessy,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. You guys are good. Congratulations. Thank you, Hope.
Good job, Hope. Thanks, Heather.
Okay, earlier tonight we said we would move item 5 forward to number 2. So we're going to do that now, or skip to item 5, however you want to phrase it, which is the COVID-19 update and this back to school plan. Dr. Hall.
Thank you. We had a discussion about this last week, and I had expressed my recommendation last week, and that recommendation hasn't changed. So that is what you see on the board bar, which is to remain with the hybrid until the end of the first semester. So that's probably the biggest issue at hand. But I also think it's important at this point that the board provide direction to the administration for the direction that you see us going for second semester. Because I think is equally as stressful as the pandemic is also clearly some issues with education. We know this isn't ideal, but in addition to that is just the unknown, the uncertainty of what lies ahead. And not having that information and not having a plan in place, I understand is another source of stress. So I don't really have too much more to say about my recommendation. Mrs. Bachman and I talked a lot last week and answered questions, and we can continue to do that, but that's where I'm at.
Okay.
I have a question about what you just said. So you want us tonight to give you direction for spring semester?
Well, frankly, what I'd like to avoid is a monthly conversation about this. I don't know that anything new gets said, really, and we're gonna have the same concerns. Jeremy, maybe you can jump in on this, but I don't see a vaccine coming. We're not gonna be in phase 5 soon, so we have to figure out how to operate in phase 4 and address some of the issues that we're having. So I just think that we can continue to kick the can down the road. And I know that January sounds like it's really far away, and it's really not. And if the direction that the board wishes to go, or the majority of the board wishes to go, is in-person learning, there's a ton of preparation that has to be done. It's not like we make that switch over a weekend or a 3-day weekend or that type of thing. There's a lot that has to be done. And I can go into that, but I just think that we will continue to spin our wheels and have the same conversation over and over again for the rest of fall semester. And so just to put that out there to consider providing direction for that. And if there's gonna be a new plan in place for second semester, then we need to work on that, and work with the MSEA on that and include teacher voice and certainly, you know, it's necessary and prudent to survey parents. We can do all kinds of different things, but I think just a long-term vision at this point would be helpful. And I know that's really hard, and maybe that's not the direction the board wants to go tonight. So there's a couple of things that are out there that I know are critically important to our students and our families, and I can't say enough for the work that everyone is doing. This is just awful. I mean, you know, no one thinks this is good. It's getting us through, and I do think it's relevant, the number of cases that we have and the number of people in quarantine, because if it's too many, then families are gonna be in the situation of having their students learning remotely, and that's exactly what we don't want. At least that's not what I want, and that's not what I'm hearing that many families want. But we do need to keep that option in place regardless of how we move forward, and that is, as I said last week, the recommendation to, you know, if the recommendation were to go to full in-person, it still needs to be 4 days a week, and not 5, because that day of planning is important for planning, for professional development, and coordination among teachers and collaboration, and those types of things. Those are really valuable days for us, and that's one thing that needs to stay in place. So again, I've put my recommendation out there and said why I think it's important to stick with it for a semester, and I'll leave it to the board to discuss that.
Do you have a recommendation of what you'd like to see for the second semester?
I just want a plan. We've invested hours and hours and hours of debate, so I think that the most important thing is a plan. I am very, very concerned about how our kids are doing. So, you know, that is a great concern to me, and I don't just mean academically, but I mean emotionally and socially, and the mental health aspects of a very strange schedule right now, and not being able to connect socially through different relationships. So, you know, I think what has to be put out there is that at some point we've got to come back and get all our kids in school. If that's the direction that the board wants to go, then we'll work on that for second semester.
I know
we can't, in my opinion, this is my opinion, we can't continue on this same mode until we get a vaccine. That's not good for our kids.
I know we've got board members that would like to come back 4 days. What if we made that transition at the quarter change rather than the semester change?
That's not my recommendation, but that's, I mean, if that's the vote you take, that's the vote you take. So I think that that's a very quick transition for families. I understand some people really want that. Some people really want it tomorrow. I get that, and I want to just reiterate what you said, Max, that
we can't pull off
people.
tomorrow.
It's
even if we wanted to.
It's turning around a massive ship. You don't just do that on a dime. There's so many things to unpack and redo. It includes transportation. It includes determining which families would not want to remain on the hybrid and who would want to go remote because their kids would be in school more. We will have families that want to pull their kids out of school and do remote. In that situation, then we're going to have to rebalance classes at the K-5 level, probably. So that's a consideration as well. So there's a lot of really big factors to determine, but there's any number of things, there's moving around furniture, there's figuring out lunches, there's a lot of different factors that have to be worked on. And I think the other thing is we've got to get together and creatively brainstorm how to make this work if the board wants to try 4-day in-person learning. It's just there's not a simple answer there. But I am very concerned about our kids. I am concerned about our staff and teachers and their well-being as well. It's not to discount anything. It's just a difficult situation for everyone involved.
Is Megan Jones still in the room by chance?
She is.
Megan, with respect to the survey that you gave the staff, did you happen to ask them if they had a different expectation or a different comfort level with second semester versus what they were replying to with respect to the rest of this first semester? Do you anticipate that do you anticipate that their opinions would change in January from what they are today, or do you feel like you can say that?
We didn't discuss that being different at semester. That wasn't presented in the survey. It wasn't discussed about their feelings for second semester compared to right now. It was just a general statement. How would you feel about coming back, period? There was no timeline given on. I mean, I guess October 1st was presented because that's what was presented to us originally, but there was no timeline given in the survey.
Thank you.
October 1st is just a few days away. I don't know that we could shift on October 1st, even if we wanted to, I think.
I guess the one thing I want to say about that October 1st that has kept coming up is that that's not at all how I understood it. Just everybody has their own thing. I felt that it was our understanding that we were going to talk as a board and let people know the direction we were thinking, not turn the switch on or whatever. I work in a school every day, so I know you can't do that. Here's my concern before I say something else, is that I don't even feel like we all walked into this with a benchmark we wanted to have for success and then to move on to the next one, which I said 1 week ago. We have these great numbers, we have all this, and we're content. If things are going well, increase your endurance. It doesn't mean we go 5 days, but I feel like we're gonna just settle and do we know what other places are doing around us? Because I'm not talking about Morton and Dunlap or Champaign-Urbana. There's a lot of other people in business around us that are doing public education 2-4 days a week. And I didn't realize until the other day that one of the districts didn't offer remote, which I can't even believe you wouldn't do that because everybody deserves a choice for free and appropriate public education. I'm still of the mindset that I would like there is a motion on a recommendation on the floor from Dr. Hall. Is this our discussion for it?
There's a recommendation, there's no motion yet.
So actually, I'd like to follow on with what Lori said. I think she makes a very good point that we're getting stuck in the idea of an on-off switch instead of a dimmer, if you will. Dr. Hall, Dr. Rummel, has there been any consideration in increasing the amount of time the kids are in the building as it is with the current hybrid plan, or starting to bring kids in for Mondays for partially or part of the day, just to try and expand out the amount of time and in-person instruction to see if we hit some threshold where things are starting to get too bad and we need to back down a little?
So we can't, Mondays are, the full day of Monday is needed to be set aside for teacher planning, collaboration, and professional development. So, I mean, that for us, that's been off the table as a discussion point in terms of bringing kids back in on Mondays. At K-5, the challenge with expanding the amount of time that kids are in the building is that we're trying to run 2 completely separate shifts. And there comes a point where if kids are in the building long enough, they're gonna need lunch. And that's a body of work in and of itself. And then we're also, remember, in the middle of the day, transporting kids to and from, and on each end of the day, throwing in routes to the junior high and high school. So there's a lot of commingled, interconnected parts that make expanding the current day longer. Expanding the day longer keeps the same number of kids in school. I think we could definitely identify some students who would benefit from being in school more, but I guarantee you that every parent out there thinks their child should be in school more right now if they're not. So, there's issues there related to that. So, it's certainly something we can look at. I think that, I guess I'm, in a sense, trying to avoid stopping and starting and switching plans and that type of thing.
Megan, can I ask you another question? Can I finish asking her the question I started?
Go right ahead. I'm sorry.
I know, that's okay. It's hard to tell. When you did your survey for the MSEA, you only asked the teachers about going from the 2 days to 5 days. Is that correct? You never asked about any other, your full day was going back to 5 days. Is that what the teachers were thinking by the question, correct?
Well, elementary level is already going 4 days, so from 2 to, I'm not sure, I guess, what you're asking about that. So it's different for each.
Right.
For the junior high and high school,
Right.
then yes, that would put them going back 4 days a week. Elementary is already going 4 days a week, so it's a little bit, I guess, I'm not sure what you're.
Well, so I know, that's the thing, is when I read your responses and the thing, like, we don't have a one size fits all right now, as it is, so it seems to me like, I have people feeding into me for the junior high and high school population. And so the way I read that is that you either go to the 2 or 5, and I'm not thinking 5. I respect that we need the planning. We need to plan if something happens and we have to go backwards. I'm pretty pumped about some of the professional development that's going on. So I guess when I read that, my understanding was that they all, when they were answering it, thought you were asking them, would you go 5? And I could see why they would say no, because they don't want to give up that remote learning opportunity day and the professional development. So
I think if you read the survey too, maybe that's what you gathered from the comment, but the survey questions were actually geared towards safety. It had nothing to do with going 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. It was strictly geared towards safety and do you feel safe going back? And it wasn't asking about the number of days, it was strictly do you feel safe? And so if the actual survey questions were about safety, so maybe you might have read into that in the comments differently, but the actual survey was about safety.
Okay.
In our discussions with the CUPHD, Nita, I think Nita's in the room, has there been any indication that CUPHD expects their recommendations on guidelines about 6 feet apart and masks and things like that to shift in January? I guess my question is, I don't see our circumstances changing in January just because the calendar switches over. And so the fact is that the motion that we made to even adopt the version of school that we're doing now did not have an expiration date. It was made and therefore covers the entire school year. So I don't know that we need to take any action to change that unless circumstances change. And I have not read anything or heard any indication that they anticipate January a big shift in recommendations. So are you getting that impression from CUPHD and those health authorities?
No, actually, the distancing and the masks and all that is for the foreseeable future. So I haven't talked to them about timelines or any of that. I just know that the first question always is about distancing and, then the masks, of course, and our mitigation factors. So CUPHD is, that has not changed and nor have we talked timelines at all. Other than concerns about, facilities and schools opening in full and, so right now they're dealing with several schools that are remote, the whole county, so they've got a gamut of things to work on, so.
Thank you.
But there's also a lot of schools in the county that are not remote solely also, so.
Right. So they're dealing with everybody in the county and what they're all doing individually and stuff.
Well, as a board member who is elected to serve the public, my motion has to be that we look at going at 4 days, starting second quarter, and letting the reopening task force look at some things like that. I mean, I have been out and I have seen classrooms and what things are done. I was in a building where all of the stuff is taken out of the classroom except for the desks, which frees up tons of space in the classroom for kids to spread out. I have seen unique situations for lunch. I've actually offered some of the solutions for lunch for some of our older kids. I just feel like we have a data point where we're right here and we need to take a jump. And it was just like in the beginning, I wanted to, try something a little different and we didn't, and we've done really well where we are now, but that's my motion. My motion is that we change our schedule to a 4-day schedule effective at second quarter. That gives 3 weeks.
I'll second that.
We got a motion, a second to go to 4 days, second quarter. That would be, what's the date on that?
Well, second quarter is supposed to start October 19th, but if the board were to do that, then I would say that we would need to have the week of October 19th completely off of school in order to plan to do that.
I just thought it was later than that, so I'm sorry, Dr. Hall. I thought we've been going.
So that would make we'd actually start then the 26th.
I mean, heck, I can go November 1st. You're gonna have, the way I was thinking is you look at it, you're gonna have 3 weeks in, you're gonna have some time off for Thanksgiving, and then you have 3 weeks, and then you have your people shut down for 2 weeks because of Christmas vacation. Winter break, holiday break, whatever you call it.
Well, if it's gonna happen prior to the start of second semester, then we, meaning those of us who would work on this internally, are going to need to use some of our remote planning days and have time to do this. Again, this isn't,
I realize that.
To bring together teachers to work on this requires them to not be doing all of the other important work that they're doing of teaching kids, so that they can sit down and work on this and do some planning if that's.
How many remote planning days are we allowed?
We have 5 for the whole year.
Okay.
So when I'm saying that though, I just want this to be heard for the teachers. That's more work for you. That's the component that I get from the parents that call me and tell me to my face, I got married, I had kids, I wanted to provide for my family. I can't provide for my family now because I'm staying home to figure out how to make this work, or, I don't know how to teach the Common Core math or that kind of thing. And that's over and over and over again. You can read all the emails that are in my box. It's over and over and over again, the people that are telling me that. The people that are telling me that they're getting kicked out. I had some great conversations with the woman that left, that they were getting kicked out because it's overloaded. And so right now, the way that we're doing the remote is not working for a lot of our families. You gave an example, but this young man said, that may not be everybody, but those are the people that are resonating in my brain. Those are the people that are coming to me. And it's impacting their socioeconomics, it's impacting their employment, and I can't have that on my conscience. I can't.
The week of the 19th, we already don't have classes scheduled on that Monday and that Friday, correct?
Well, we wouldn't on the Monday, because it's a Monday, and then that Friday, October 23rd is a day off from school.
So we would take 3 of our other days. Is that what we do?
That would, in my mind, sitting here right now, make the most sense. I go back to that, it's not my recommendation.
Right, understand.
Hey, Max, point of order here. We've got a recommendation in front of us. It seems like it ought to be voted up or down.
We already have a motion on the floor. Sorry.
Can I comment on the motion on the floor?
I'm sorry?
May I comment on the motion on the floor?
Yes.
Lori, I actually have been thinking along the same lines that you have about the people coming to us and telling us that they are struggling or the students are struggling. Um, I know that I actually went back and read every email we've received the past weeks. I know that about 60% of them, people are actually asking us to stay hybrid, and about 40% of them, people are asking to switch to more days in person. And I want to be very clear that I think that this is a majority vote kind of thing, because the minority voice should be heard in a republic. But I'm wondering whether we should think outside the box and see if we can think of ways to address some of the struggles that we hear people having in various ways, while still keeping the recommendation that the superintendent is making and the teachers are making and a lot of the public is making, so that we can, because we can't just ignore hurt. But I'm just wondering if there's another way. I know that's not the way people are asking for it to be solved, but is there another way that we might be able to solve that without causing the other problems and going against the recommendations that we have before us? Our attorneys, our nurse, our superintendent, our teachers, a lot of our public.
Other thoughts, comments on the motion?
My thoughts are actually I'm in favor of the superintendent's recommendation. One of the things that does disturb me as much as anything is the kids, the difficulties to pull this off and to make that happen. So the whole social and emotional part of this, and in fact the quality of the teaching. But I also believe that one of the things that we underestimate is the difficulty operationally to make changes. So I believe, and I've heard that the change in operations has lots of moving parts. So I'm actually in favor of keeping this the same for the semester, looking at alternatives for the next semester. And I think changing midstream here may cause more trauma than it's worth on the operational side.
That's almost a whole year out of school, 9 months. If you take from March 11th to January, well, it is. It's a whole school year. You had remote learning crazy in the springtime, which was crazy for me too, because I'm one of these people. I did the hybrid learning, fourth quarter, which we had to switch into because we didn't go back to school. Then we've had the summer off, and then we've had remote now. I'm so extraordinarily concerned about our students falling behind, and especially our older ones. And you're making, you're moving forward on voting. I can't support that, but I respect all the information that's given to me.
Max, I think, my concern is that this isn't going anywhere. That we're gonna have fluctuations in cases throughout the year, up and down. Even if by some miracle we have a vaccine by the end of the year, not all would take it, and whether it really provided the protection that we wanted, I think is very questionable too. So my concern is that if we continue the status quo, that, like Lori says, that we're missing a large chunk of our students' education, even if you took out from last spring and just like this year, that if you would compare the start of this year with the start of last year, which I know you can't really, and how far behind those kids are already, even a month in to where they were before, I think we would be astounded by that. And I think we've got to start figuring out how to learn to live with the virus, because we can't do this forever. we have businesses in town who have learned to live with the virus and are functioning and operational and keeping their employees employed and, earning income. So at some point, we have to do the same because it's just not possible to continue this and to provide an education to our students that is appropriate. And I think primarily, every year is important, but I think of our juniors and seniors especially, the importance of these years are huge, and you don't have 5 or 6 more years to pick it back up, you know what I mean? And I know that some of the national testing has been put aside by some of the universities with ACT and SAT, but that's not going to be forever either. So I think there's going to be some downstream effects for some of our high school students that are going to be, and I think probably our late junior high school students, that adolescent teenage years where some of that social emotional is so huge as well. And there's already a huge struggle with mental health at that age. So I think we've got to learn to live with it. We've got to figure that out. I know that there's anxiety about it, and I'm not discounting that. I'm not discounting anything about COVID. But we've got to be able to move forward with some sort of plan that educates our students appropriately.
Okay. Other thoughts on the motion that's on the floor?
Yeah, for me, I'm not going to be able to support a plan that doesn't allow us to maximize following the guidelines handed down to us by the health professionals, the CUPHD. I have the same concerns about education and social emotional health that many of you do. I believe that we can address some of those issues, but it's going to require some out-of-the-box thinking and some shifting. Tonight at the town hall, the word pivot was used, and I think that the ability to pivot and be nimble is something that we probably are going to have to get good at. But I have no understanding as to how we will get kids back into the classroom and learn to live with this unless what that means is we throw all of the precautionary guidelines that people are asking us to fulfill out the window, the distancing, mask wearing. I don't have any understanding as to how kids will go back into these schools full time and be able to remain socially distanced. I was in the junior high and the high school building on Friday, and the staff and the kids are taking extraordinary measures to do the best that they can, but our facilities, quite frankly, just can't handle 6 foot of distance. Even with the kids that are going as we have them in the hybrid, there were classes where 6 feet is not being maintained. And I know that the guidelines say or best effort, but I think a minimum of 6 is important. And so if for no other reason than that we have to think about following the public health guidelines that are set down before us, because otherwise those entities will come in and they will shut us down. They will force us to quarantine, and then we'll be in a situation where aren't educated in any respect, and that teachers are going to be forced to turn literally on a dime and figure out tomorrow how to do something completely differently. And so that being said, and the fact that the surveys, there is no question in my mind that the teachers do not feel comfortable going back into those buildings in any manner that resembles normal for August or last fall, meaning not taking any of the social distancing precautions, which we won't be able to do. And in my tenure on the board, I have had other board members, members of the community, parents, the superintendent, teachers come and say to us, we are the experts, you need to trust us. And there is no way that right now I can take an overwhelming majority of teachers telling us that they do not physically feel safe in the building and ask them to do that. I'm not going to be able to do that.
Any other thoughts on the motion on the table?
I'll just speak for myself. My concern is the direction we've received, like Megan mentioned, the direction we've received from our state, local, and federal authorities, public health authorities. And I can't support an option that is going to ignore those experts' direction. And there's also an issue of significant liability concerns that we, I mean, the wellness of our students and our staff and taking care of our people, that comes first, but we also have to pay attention to the liability issues, and they are significant, and they are very concerning for me. So unfortunately, I won't be able to, as much as I'd like to have kids getting back to school, I'm not gonna be able to support this.
Anyone else on the motion?
Can we reread the motion?
Dawn, you can do that, or I can offer a summary.
All I have is motion made by Larson, seconded by Hendricks to go 4 days starting second quarter.
Oh, I thought we read the original motion from Dr. Hall, I'm sorry.
Okay. So the motion on the table is to go 4 days, 4 full days, starting second quarter.
So that would be October 19th, but then we talked about.
October 19th, with the actual implementation probably being October 26th, is what Dr. Hall is telling us. So they would have time to plan. Okay? So that's the motion. If there's no further discussion, do we have a roll call vote on that, please?
Keith,
No.
Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy,
No.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
No.
Giles,
No.
McComb.
Yes. I believe that failed, correct? Okay. Be the recommendation of the superintendent that we look at an option where we start 4 days at the start of the second semester. I think that.
No, my recommendation is, what's on the motion is to
Right.
continue this.
I know. My recommendation.
Oh, okay, I thought
I'm sorry.
you quoted me.
No, I wasn't quoting you. My recommendation is we look at an option that starts 4 days starting second semester. I think that gives us more time to plan, and still gets us to a 4-day in-person plan.
So we need to vote on Lindsay's.
No, we need to vote on that, yeah.
Oh, well, okay.
Because it gets us through the first semester. Right, Dr. Hall? Here says through the first semester specifically.
As a point of order, if we don't do anything, we remain on the plan that we are currently on. There's no required vote right now.
Plan we're on. I would agree with that.
And we could remain on that plan until the time the board feels it would be prudent to change.
Okay. So I'll alter the motion I just started to try to make. We remain on the current plan for the rest of the first semester, and that we ask our administrators team and our reopening team to plan, give us a model for a 4-day-a-week plan starting second semester.
I'd second that.
Okay. So we got a motion and a second on that plan. Is there a discussion on that?
Are teachers going to be given the option to not participate in this if they don't feel safe? Again, I have the same issue with this that I do with what we talked, it's the same motion, it's just changing to an arbitrary date where there's no indication that any of the challenges that we're facing are going to have shifted in any way, shape, or form. I don't believe that the MSEA asked the teachers. So are we giving teachers the option to not teach in the classroom if we come January 1st?
I think it gives, my impression is that this gives about 3 months or 2.5 months to prepare, come up with a plan to see if it would be acceptable for our teachers and for our parents and our students to move forward. And I think for planning purposes, I think that's what Lindsay would like, right?
Exactly.
So You know, if we're not going to be able to do it here at the second quarter, then I think this gives us plenty of time to prepare and come up with a plan that I hope would be acceptable for all.
We would anticipate it. I think we'd anticipate that we'd probably have some students move off remote back to full time, but I think there'd probably be more students moving to remote.
Absolutely, there would be some mobility for
And
sure.
so there would be probably some need for staff to cover that. So I think that's all options that the administration and the task force would have to look at.
Absolutely.
And look at how that affects teachers.
What if we have teachers, what if we have more teachers who want to teach remotely than we have students that want to learn remotely? Will each teacher be afforded the opportunity to make their individual choice for themselves, and their job will be secure regardless of this way the student population stacks up for in-person versus remote?
Let's be clear that no one's losing their job.
I'm just asking the question because these are the things that have been brought to me.
I understand that, and so I wanted to be clear in that statement, and also just say that there would be a lot of things that we would talk through, and that's the point of having the time to do that, to work with our teachers and work with the MSCA to come up with viable solutions. I don't have, to answer your question tonight, I don't have those answers other than to be clear, no one is losing their job.
I support the active planning. I think it's a wise move.
I like the active planning, but I feel as though what I'm hearing is a little bit different than the motion, which is the task force and the administration could consider a plan and bring it to us before we would decide. I mean, I feel like it would be better to hear what in-person learning would look like in the spring semester, and after we hear that, then make a decision about whether we want to go in that direction, rather than vote that we're going in that direction and hoping we have a plan that we like later.
I think we need to set a direction and then work a plan to get us there. That would be my opinion.
Didn't last time we hear a plan and before we voted on anything?
I think we did.
Yes, more plans than we were offered.
I think we had at least the skeleton of a plan. And we, as a plan as we've ever seen, we had before we voted. I'm just saying, I hear people say, let's let the administration work on a plan and then see if the board approves.
I think the community needs to know where we're headed so they can plan their lives with their families. I think teachers need to know where we're headed so they can figure out where they're at in this. I think administrators need to know where we're going so they can figure out what we need to work through to get there. So I think it's, and you asked Dr. Hall earlier, state that you would like some sense of direction for the second semester. So that's what I'm attempting to do here.
So I just have a question about the motion itself. I want to make sure I understand. If the motion passes, we are saying that the district will move to 4-day-a-week in person in the second semester. Am I getting
Along
that?
with a remote option.
Along with the remote option, yes. But the motion is saying we will move to that option, not that we are just developing a plan and then we'll talk about it. This is a motion to actually do it in January.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Will any of that planning require that we follow CUPHD and distancing guidelines?
Absolutely.
I think this may be a little separate from the motion, but other things to consider as you're meeting and talking, and even more immediate, I guess, is the hybrid plan that we're on right now. There's definitely needs to be some changes. And I don't know what the solutions are, but I don't think we can go a second quarter and have the same thing happen again with this hybrid plan either. I think we've got to have some improvement there to try and meet these educational needs.
I just want to say that I completely agree with Jeremy on that. I think that we need to work hard to show that our parents that we can improve the modality that we currently have. I think we've seen the emails, and we had a young man tell us tonight again that there is a lot of downtime for students when they are virtual. And I think that we've been patient to let teachers and staff figure out how to deliver school in this brand new mode. But I think we need to show improvement, like Jeremy's saying.
On the motion that's on the floor, I'd just like to add, as administrators in the task force plan toward the second semester, I think we're open to looking at, there are certain things we know that are gonna look different. We know the length of day is not probably gonna be what the length of day was before, okay? So we understand that. I think we need to know, what do we need in classrooms in our buildings to help that we don't have now? You know, do we need more safeguards to put teachers behind? Do we need, you know, what do we need? I think Dr. Schultz mentioned, you know, do we need some big screen TVs so we can see the whole classes working remotely at one time? Do we need plexiglass boxes to put staff in?
What don't we need in the room?
What
that
don't we
take up
need?
space?
Just, you know,
that take up space.
lunch is an issue. Do we need to do, is there anything different we can do with lunch? You know, we've always had closed campus at the high school. Is there any benefit to opening campus? I don't know, but I think we need to put everything like that. I'm not saying we do that either. I'm just saying everything's on the table as far as we think it will help us to get better and help us to get where we need to be.
And when we talked about this in the beginning, we talked about the community collaboration. I mean, we have some pretty big buildings around the schools that have big spaces. For example, the two churches that are, are those places where we can utilize something there for a lunch or something like that, if it's by the high school. We do have to think outside the box, because we cannot be content with 2.5 days for the rest of the year.
And I'm not saying we've not thought about those things, and maybe we've thought about those things, and I'm just saying, once again, whatever needs to be on the table to help make this work successful, bring us back those things.
Yeah, Lori makes a very good suggestion about looking at other spaces. You know, we've heard from parents, actually I think one of the parents that talked tonight, she has emailed us before to talk about her internet issues. If the kids that are remote and are having internet issues could use community spaces like church buildings and community centers.
And we have people doing that now because it's not being met. So we have alternative going on, but I think that's such a disservice to our students and our families to have them have to use another facility, and some with economics related to it, because we're not meeting their needs as a district now. So that's what's bothering me, to our teachers and our teachers union, that we have families that are going alternative places and having like care costs because they need that internet to be successful for school. And that's not a free and appropriate public education at all.
I'm a little concerned too about the people that Max referred to that would then choose not to have in-person education at all. Parents who now feel that their children are safe at school, and if the school was to change to a plan they no longer felt was safe, they'd pull their kid out completely, and that might cause issues as well.
I think it's safe to assume we'll have some movement both directions, probably more movement. I would think a slight increase on remote full, but net, but I don't know that. Other comments on the motion on the floor?
Can we repeat that motion again?
Motion on the floor is that we continue with a hybrid model through the end of this semester, that we move second semester to 4 full days. And we instruct our administrative team to work with our opening task force or whatever groups they sense are the important folks to work with to figure out how to make that happen.
Before we vote, can we have Lindsay tell us whether she recommends that we approve that motion or disapprove?
I'm in favor of it.
Okay.
Thanks for answering that on the spot.
Okay, if there's no other comments, could we have a roll call vote on that, please?
Giles,
Yes.
Key, Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
No?
Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy,
No.
McComb.
Yes. So that passes and we'll make the change at the quarter. Oh, the other thing is we said 4 full days, you know, right now Monday's remote day. Is Monday the day we want to continue to be run? That's, like I said, everything's on the deal. All right, we've been going almost 2 hours. We haven't had a comfort break yet. So we're gonna take 5 minutes and do that. And we'll come back in 5 minutes with item 2 on the agenda.
Thanks, Tom.
That's got to be back. Hang on, I'll tell you who it is. Hang on, I'll tell you who it is.
Next, we're up. Rolling.
That was Patrick. Okay, welcome back. I believe we are all here. And we have WebEx back up, right? Y'all hear me on WebEx?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. And then we have the live feed back up. And we've completed items 1 and 5. Now we're gonna go back to item 2, which is budget adoption. Heather.
Yes. Good evening again, board and Dr. Hall. I'm back up here with the budget. Since we last met, the major changes are what I spoke of earlier, with the grant being approved. It was able to reduce our deficit, taking expenses out of district funds and putting them into the grant. And otherwise, besides that, it's just been basically reclassification of expenses into different functions, but nothing major. So I would like approval of the budget so that we can proceed, and my goal is to come out better than the budget, of course.
Okay, we've had our budget hearing and Heather's here tonight. And Superintendent recommends the board adopt the budget as presented. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion on the budget.
Heather, it looks like the budgeted revenues for the ed fund from local sources dropped by 2.2 million this year. And it looks like the local sources revenues for all the other funds dropped by about 15 to 25%. Can you just explain why that was forecasted down so much?
Yes. One thing I did this year is, last year we budgeted to get that additional 4 million in before year end from the treasurer's office. I did not budget for that this year because I'm assuming we're just gonna get 1 year's worth of property taxes. Being that that's what we've gotten the last 2 years, and I'm hoping we get at least that much. So that's the reason for that. Another reason for local is because the corporate replacement taxes. The estimates came in from the state and they were 17% down. So of course, we assume that, I assume that 17%. Every other line, I tried to keep flat in the local. When it comes to like food service, I actually increased a little bit just because of the unknown. But then for textbooks and other fees, those increased. I did decrease the athletic fees a little bit, just not knowing whether or not we would have athletics going forward to be more conservative. So, and that, does that answer your question? Or is there a certain one that you're referring to? Okay.
So you're expecting we're only going to get the revenues from the treasurer for this fiscal year and not any funds from last fiscal year. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, see, right now, last year we operated off the 2018 levy. That 2019 levy is the one that Champaign County has always been reliant on getting a large portion of that, $8 million in the year before. Since the issues with the treasurer's office, we've only been seeing 4 million of that. Last year, the other 4 million was budgeted. This year, I am not budgeting that extra 4 million, assuming that it will only be 1 year's worth, and we're not gonna get that additional money.
In other words, the county's running behind the old schedule and getting
Yes.
money to us, and we assumed they were gonna catch up, and now it looks like we're assuming they're not gonna catch up, that they continue to run behind.
Yes. And I talked to the village about it as well, and as soon as we get somebody in there, what we need to do is sit and talk to them and see what, the new treasurer's intentions are as well.
What the real question is why can't they get it caught back up, is what we don't know.
So it is 1 year's worth, just no more than 1 year's worth, assuming that they are not going to pay as much as they had in 2 years ago.
Okay. The revenue budget for the capital projects is 1.95 million. Does that include the sales tax dollars, or do the sales tax dollars go somewhere else?
No, that includes the sales tax dollars. That is the sales tax dollars, and I did a 20% decrease on that from last year.
Okay, so are we going to be able to? Are we going to have an abatement this year?
Yes. Basically, the way that it's done, and I asked this question to Steeple as well, we put money away for the next year, every year. So this is showing already making the payments for this next year with last year's money. So no, I mean, we'll be able to pay our bills and still have a little bit of money for the next year as well.
So do we need to use the ending fund balance to pay the abatement though? Or are we going to have enough?
Yes, we will have enough.
Which fund does that come out of? Bond and interest?
Yes.
Do you know what the abatement amount will be this year? Just a ballpark is fine.
I do not know offhand.
Okay.
I mean, it's put into the budget already. I mean, I put it in as we were going to do it. I can look it up real quick if you want me to.
No, that's okay. If you would just email me about it later, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Heather?
You will see the largest part of the deficit is out of non-operational funds, and those are all projects that have already been approved. So, and you'll see, if you looked at the audit numbers, you'll see our fund balance went up this last year, and now it goes down by about the same amount. And the reason why is because we got the money last year, and we're just now spending it. So, and this next year.
Heather, it looks like we've got 423K budgeted for fire prevention and safety in the support services.
Yes.
What's that for?
That is for the dust collection system. That is for the paint booth. And that is for the high school roof, the rest that needed to be paid. And that it's basically all the project, and part of the administrative offices, some of that was able to go towards health, life, safety as well. My goal is to use health, life, safety if we can, just because it comes in our levy every year, but also it does not affect our operational budget.
And what about what's the plan for the boilers that is being proposed?
That is basically this is just to get an amendment done. So that, because one thing that, Damien and we have talked with Damien about is having it ready, just in case, right now we're looking at some kind of like staggered plan, so that we can continue to use health, life, safety dollars. But, in any event, it's good to have it approved ahead of time, no matter what, so that you're prepared. Because sometimes it takes the state a while to get back.
That's on the agenda.
Oh, okay. So we're not actually approving to move forward with that tonight. We're just we're approving to, I get it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the budget?
No, thanks for the good audit. I mean, thank you.
All right, do a roll call vote on the budget, please.
Larson,
Yes. Hendricks,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Hennessy,
No.
Keith,
Yes.
Schultz,
Abstain.
McComb.
Yes.
Heather, thank you. You did a great job over the last 6 to 8 weeks, just preparing that and keeping everybody updated and informed. Thank you.
Dr. Hall, to go along with that, it was nice to have Mrs. Wheeler say that too from.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so thanks.
Item number 3, the IGA with the Village of Mahomet on 13 acres. Dr. Hall.
All right, this has been an item of discussion for on a number of different occasions, and it was brought before the board in August, I believe, combined with the sale of the junior high, and we've separated that out just to have an intergovernmental agreement that covers the sale of 13 acres to the village. So it is my recommendation to approve the intergovernmental agreement this month. If the board votes to approve that, then we would bring a resolution for the sale of the property to the October 19th meeting.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement covering 13 acres?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Question on a point of order on the maintenance and use piece to this. It indicates that the village already operates or owns 13 Acres Park. So would that have to be dated after closing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's a current one in place that's pretty much identical.
That could continue, okay.
With us on it, yeah.
Okay.
Other questions on 13 acres? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Hennessy,
No.
Schultz,
No.
Keith,
No.
Giles,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. Okay.
Just
Next,
Max, can you please clarify that it's your understanding that that did not pass because it requires a 2/3 vote?
I'm sorry, what?
This requires a 2/3 majority in order to pass.
The IGA does not.
That's incorrect.
A sale resolution
It's
would,
the resolution for sale that requires a 2/3 vote.
not the IGA.
But the IGA states in it that we are transferring ownership, so that IGA cannot exist the way that it's stated if we're going to pass it with a simple majority.
We got a legal opinion from the attorneys, the IGA is fine the way it is. Next month, there'll be a resolution to sell, and then we can talk about that at that point. That does have to pass at a higher level. Patrick, you on?
Yes, I'm on. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so this is the Conway Farms IGA is next. Dr. Hall.
We also had a presentation of this at the August 17th board meeting. Our colleagues from the Village of Mahomet were available to answer questions, and there was a discussion, and we said that we'd be bringing this back for a vote this evening. So here it is. This replaces the old intergovernmental agreement, which requires the school district to build roads in places that we no longer want to have those roads, and this updates that to a place that we're both village and school district at a point to vote on it. So I approve the recommendation, or I recommend that the board approve this intergovernmental agreement.
Also, this just came in from the village a few minutes ago. the motion should include, that section 5A, water lines would be revised to say that the water lines are constructed along South Mahomet Road and Churchill Road. I think they inadvertently left Churchill Road off of that. So they've asked for that to be approved with that revision, and then they will get a new copy to us, the state staff.
And that is the village constructing those.
That is, you're right. The village constructing the water mains. Basically, wherever the roads are being constructed, water mains being constructed.
So will we table it and move it so we
No.
can see it? I mean, you're gonna have to repeat it then. 'Cause I'm-
We're approving it with a revision that says the water mains will be provided along South Mahomet Road and Churchill Road. And Churchill Road. So basically, wherever we build roads, wherever the roads are being built, which is being managed by the village and done with TIF money, they're adding water main.
And this is for the number 4, though, the one, we haven't voted on it yet. You said we're gonna approve it, but like, you're talking about the Conway Farms one, right?
I'm saying Conway Farms,
Okay.
the motion to approve includes amending part 5 to add the water main along Churchill Road.
Good.
The village wants us to know that that is not there now, but should have been, and will be included in the version that we signed.
That
Assuming we
clarity
pass
is
it.
well. Clarity is very welcome, yes.
Okay, so with that clarification, discussion.
Do we have a motion yet?
Yeah. Oh, no, someone needs to.
So move with that, addition in 5A.
Okay?
I'll second.
Motion and second, discussion.
As I've said every time we've discussed this, I don't believe that it's in the best interest of the district or for the students for a road to go through the middle of our property. I'm not opposed to a road. I'm only opposed to the placement of the road. I requested a meeting with the village board so we could negotiate the placement of the road to a location that would be more acceptable, but that request was denied. And so I cannot support this agreement in its current state.
Other discussion?
So I took the liberty of asking some homeowners in the Conway Farms area, and I asked Damien specifically questions about your concern, Colleen, because that's the side of town you also live on too. He made it sound like it wasn't an issue. Is he still there? Because he was there. Damien?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, so when we had our conference call, like everybody had their one last week, I asked that. You don't think that will in your opinion, you don't think that would change the way that we would lay out those properties should we do buildings out there? Is that correct or not? Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's correct. I think last spring, maybe when this was going on, we looked at that and kind of studied how a new facility could fit out there, and the portion of property that remains to the south is still viable for use. At this point, I've studied it up to the size of, middle school or junior high with fields.
So Colleen, I want you to know that I heard what you said there and then asked around too. So if that's his opinion, you're welcome to have yours, but I did want you to know that I was trying to get more information because I thought that was a valid point.
Thanks. I also note that the road changes every time we talk about it. The location of the road is a little different. So I'm not sure which one Damien looked at, but because we don't know what we want to do with that land, I'm not sure. I mean, we haven't made a decision about what to do, so I'm not sure how we can know what's going to fit.
I would speak to, and as far as site logistics of any school property, access to and from that site is the most critical and most difficult piece. Considering to the east, Prairie View Road's the closest. We already have a lot of traffic coming from the north. I mean, it would seem that this is really a way to give us access to our sites in a very effective manner, to be able to divide or traffic access coming from multiple directions, which ultimately, regardless of if it's elementary school, middle school, high school, whatever type of building on that site, that'll be a critical piece. As far as knowing what we put on the site, you're right, we haven't, that's actually a piece we'll talk about in a little bit with community engagement, but the idea too is that there are common or understood pieces that would be found on any school site. That's essentially what I was basing it on, was our current size of district with growth and what those needs would be. So, yeah, and I think last time what I'd seen it, I don't believe the location's changed where it crosses the district's property. I think there's been some adjustments to the east, possibly about how the S curve works and things like that. But that's my knowledge to this point.
Is the timeline for the connection of South Mahomet Road to Prairie View Road pretty firm? They're saying here in 2022?
Yes. Well, it's firm if we give them the green light and move forward with this. We've got a timing issue with the railroad that we're trying to hit here, and a bidding timing issue that Kelly and the village are trying to hit. So if we were not to take action on this, then no, that timing would not be firm. But if we go ahead and take action on this, we're set up for the road to be constructed across our property in 2021, and then across the remaining parcel of Prairie View Road in 2022.
And the size of the road, will there be turn lanes or on-street parking, or just to facilitate traffic flow through there, or do we have any idea?
Patrick, can you speak to that?
No, on the section through from the railroad track to Churchill Road would not have turn lanes or would not have parking on that road. It's going to be a road that's going to be designed to get traffic through, of course, to the school sites and beyond. So, but then the Churchill Road will be the same size that it is now, which is a 36-foot pavement.
And what size will South Mahomet Road be?
South Mahomet Road, as I said, would be no street parking. I believe that's 24-foot pavement.
Wouldn't it seem though, if we were going to turn into a school, you'd need a turn lane?
Well, there would be a turn lane at Churchill.
But what if
that intersection would be designed?
I think where a turn lane would be added for a school would depend on where we add a building and when.
Yeah, typically that's a part of the construction project of the building. There'd be traffic studies done to make sure that we've got proper queuing on and off site and not access far enough from intersections and all that type of thing. And then that gets coordinated with the village as well as the project to implement that.
If we put that in now, it would limit where we could put things later, or maybe have to be moved depending on where we put things later.
Or put another way, if the water mains are in east, west, and north, south, and then we want a turn lane, does anything have to change?
No, that should not impact the turn lane because the water mains would be in the full right of way. And there's usually room for that. Yeah, but anywhere there's an intersection, there would be a turn lane added on that road. So if you guys wanted another entrance outside of Churchill Road, there would be a turn lane added at that point when your building is constructed. It would just be a widening of that section. Same thing goes to the property to the west. If they design their subdivision with two streets that cross South Mahomet Road, there would be, they would certainly add a turn lane through that section. I would imagine they would add a turn lane through that section if they did that.
Thank you.
I'll just comment. I'm supportive of this. It's a result of 5 years of discussion and planning and meetings. And it's taken us a long time to get here. It's a much better agreement for both parties than our current agreement. It shifts the infrastructure costs and the borrowing for those costs away from the district, which is helpful. It shifts the responsibility to develop and manage the project away from the district, which we like. We're not in the road and sewer building business. It allows us to develop the south part of the property. It gives us access, it gives us water mains, it gives us the sewer that's not there now. It gives us access across the railroad tracks to South Mahomet onto the school property. It provides a south route out of town to the east that doesn't exist now. And I know there's folks, me included, that would probably like to see Country Ridge become the major east route out of this south part of town. But you know, that's 20 or 30 years away and doesn't help us get our site developed. So I'm supportive of moving forward with this. Other comments?
Are the water and sewer services, do those run currently along Churchill?
I can answer that. On Churchill, there is no sewer that runs along Churchill currently because your building sites now are accessed, your sewer is accessed through a different portion of the property. So there are no lines that run along there because they have to be served, you know, from that location. But the new sewer line would run along South Mahomet Road that's picked up over by the railroad tracks. That's the location where that would come from. And then when we build the little section of Churchill Road that goes south on south of South Mahomet Road, there's a little section that takes it to the property line with Adkins Group. A sewer will be put in that direction as well through that little strip or little piece.
And water goes along all of it.
Yeah, water goes along all of it.
You're saying the sewer connection right now is over in like the southwest corner of Peters land?
That serves that half of the site, that serves that part of the property. That's where the sewer would have to come from, yes.
And is it on the east side of the tracks or the west side of the tracks?
It's on the west side of the tracks.
Okay, so it's got to go under, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all, you know, I'll just summarize. It's gravity, you know, it has to come from certain places. So that's where that actually would come from to serve that portion of the properties.
This also gets rid of about $50,000 or $60,000 worth of cost to develop that sewer that we were originally responsible for, and shifts to the TIF now. You know, the TIF is funded with tax dollars, some of which we would have got anyway, but it then becomes the TIF's responsibility to finance that and put it in and not ours. So that part's helpful.
I just want to clarify one thing real quick. Any intersections that would be added by either developer on what would be Darren Peters' land or the school would be added if warranted. There's always engineering. That's kind of an engineering determination if something's warranted or not. But there would certainly be likelihood of it.
Any other questions by board members or comments? Give a roll call vote, please.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Hennessy,
No.
Schultz,
No.
Larson? Yes. Giles?
Yes.
Keith? McComb?
Yes.
Can I ask a question? Is it okay? I'm asking a question about a road. Why and when and was that road on Prairie View developed with already a turn lane in it for development? It's already developed out there, but there's nothing that goes to it. How did that come about? Because I've had a lot of constituents ask me that. And I don't know. And if you don't know, Patrick or Sean or whomever,
Are you talking about Privy Road?
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the Privy Road was a TIF funded project as well as the 150. When we had a group of developers that had land out east of town on 150, we funded a TIF project to get water and sewer out to that location and widened the pavement. So 150 was widened.
Right.
Additionally, we went ahead and funded the project to have that maybe I think it's 3/4 of a mile section or so. I think maybe close to a mile, but I think it's a little less than that. Section on South Prairie Road, south of 150, that was also widened for future development. There was no particular development in store for that site, but we felt like having the infrastructure prepared and done with would help that property sell and be redeveloped.
Thank you. I could vote for this after asking people because it's a road to somewhere, but like that right now is a developed lane that goes nowhere. So
Yeah.
and that's been, people in the community have asked. So thank you for
But
answering that.
think about this: when this road eventually connects with Prairie View Road on the south, now you've got improved roads the entire way.
I got that.
So this will meet up at that same spot.
Sure.
Well, it makes sense then.
Yep.
As a point of clarification, I believe that because this is the land transfer from one municipality to another, that it requires a 2/3 vote and thus the motion failed. Is that correct?
No.
This is just a right of way issue, right?
I didn't even hear what she said.
Just a simple majority is all it takes.
Right.
I don't believe that is correct.
We approved the IGA, not the sale of the property. Is that correct?
Right.
Right.
The IGA is a transfer of land between one public entity and another public entity. Any transfer of land between public entities requires a 2/3 vote.
This IGA only offers a right of way.
That's right.
It's a transfer of land.
No, it's still our land.
We're giving the village right away. We own the property. We checked with attorneys before we did this. I'm not an attorney, so I can't tell you. Item 6, community engagement. Dr. Hall.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have two guests that are joining us. One's a familiar face and one is a new face. David Schlitt, our architect from BLDD, and Rod Wright is with us tonight. Thank you for remaining with us through the last couple of hours of discussion. We appreciate your time tonight.
Okay.
So we want to talk a little bit about community engagement initiative, and this has been an item of discussion for well over a year now with the board. Community engagement is a mechanism by which we can obtain community feedback and input on a variety of topics related to the district. Things such as instruction and learning, the financial health of the district, facilities, the culture of our district. And often the community engagement initiatives form a set of goals or a strategic plan for the board, a roadmap of sorts that the board then has the confidence that the voices of our taxpayers were heard in the process. In January of 2020, our board agreed to do a request for proposals for a community engagement initiative. The RFPs were due back to the district on March 9th, and we received 2 of those RFPs. And then, of course, shortly after that, the pandemic took precedence over everything, and community engagement and a lot of other things took a back seat for a little while. So fast forward to this evening, the board did just vote to approve 2 intergovernmental agreements, which are related to a long-term facilities plan. And those IGAs have been discussed on multiple occasions. most recently August 17th, and even last year with a joint meeting between the Village of Mahomet and the Board of Education. So the development of roads and infrastructure on this campus, as well as the sale of 13 acres are part of the long-term vision for the district. But seeking out and obtaining feedback from our stakeholders is important in terms of formulating a long-term facilities vision and plan. So in being in need of that plan, and that was something that was discussed back on August 17th, was we need to put together a facilities plan to address things like aging buildings, growing enrollment, and a subsequent lack of space. These plans are more successful when voices from our community are heard. So tonight we're going to hear an overview of this community engagement process from two potential partners in this endeavor, BLDD Architects and Creative Entourage. And over the last 10 days, we've had meetings with individual board members to introduce them well, we know Damien, but also introduce them to Mr. Wright. This has been a process to provide a place to answer questions. It was not a decision-making venue. It was simply just introducing the process and setting aside some time for conversation and questions. So tonight's discussion is an extension of that, as well as a chance to further discuss what next steps might be. So Damien, gonna hand the baton off to you to provide an overview.
Great. Yeah, well, thank you for introducing some of that background and some of the conversations we've had over the past week or 10 days. So really what I was hoping to do is I was just going to briefly go over kind of the process, as discussed. And, one piece that has been presented to the board for, if you will, action or feedback and fine tuning is a charge. And really wanted to just walk through what that charge does, what it sets off, and its intent. So, one piece that's really important to consider is that, BLDD for the past, several decades, and many of those with working alongside Rod and his former capacity at Unicom Arc, really have identified and determined and really found the success of true long-term facility planning, the importance of it being a community-based and community-led effort. As architects, we like to, control designs and think that we know a lot about the way that they can function. But in reality, to find a true master plan solution of how it's going to function for really some of the bigger needs, with community growth, with curriculum delivery and those types of things, getting a true voice of the community is important. So what we've outlined and kind of started the discussion about is really this community engagement planning process. There's really two key components to it. The first being the facilitation team. So I'll go into some detail here in a minute, but that's really the group that helps to create this process and to direct it from really the community side of it, working in conjunction with BLDD and Creative Entourage. The second piece is really how do you actually get the greater voice of the community, beyond that group of people that are brought together to really understand, the different voices, the different concerns, the different ideas that might be living out there in the community. So with the facilitation team, this is really the group to whom the charge would be directed. This is, that charge that is really a draft and was included in the board book for tonight. The intention of that is giving the marching orders to that facilitation group. So that group then understands what the board is hoping to get from the process. And then really they're charged with making it happen. So identifying how community meetings might function, what types of information need to be maybe clarified or followed up on in different meetings, and really just to help kind of shepherd and usher the community as a whole through that. We generally see that as being maybe a 20-person group. Ultimately, probably have a couple of representatives from the Board of Education that are really there as eyes and ears to hear from the board perspective, not necessarily directing the process, but really there as sounding board if there are clarifications necessary. Also an administrator or two from the district, which is really important, again, to keep a pulse and a really direct line to an understanding of some of the pieces that, your district architect or communication personnel may not have access to directly. Then the remainder would be actually community members. And we can talk about how they're selected, but 10, 15 community members to round out that group. With that, they're creating these community meetings and this process. So again, Rod and I would have kind of some feedback and input on best practices, how to get people engaged, what types of subject matter we want to make sure we hit on in different meetings. But in reality, it comes down to being custom built for the Mahomet-Seymour School District. The second piece of that then is really the community piece. So they're brought into this as active participants. So it's not a matter of coming to a bunch of presentations where I talk about buildings and how I think we should plan them, or even the community group telling about what their ideas are. It's really about active work type activities. Typically, we would run these fully in person, large groups, large rooms, work tables. I could see that probably being supplemented this time around, and other planning efforts I'm looking at doing similarly, supplementing with some virtual breakouts and things like that. But each of these meetings really go around, really kind of 4 key points. One is a review. So it's either a review of some district background or of the previous meeting, just to make sure that everybody's clear on the work that's happened and there's kind of some transparency going meeting to meeting. There's always an educational portion. So the community group as a whole can learn something, whether it be about district finance and some of the limitations or opportunities, whether it be about 21st century delivery of education, or even just the simple physical needs of the district's facilities. The second piece is most often an actual work item where we have the groups break down and actually do efforts that have some tangible output, whether it be kind of survey type work, whether it be actually coming up with different scenarios for what we do with our different buildings. But that's actually where kind of the rubber meets the road. That's where we're having people actually doing work, as opposed to just sitting back and digesting what's presented to them. And then lastly, there's a report out. So oftentimes we'll have each table then, or breakout group, depending on the venue, go through and report out what their findings as a group were. So not as an individual. It's not 200 individual reports. It's maybe 20 group reports about what their group said. That gives some kind of instant feedback of what happened in the meeting, and also allows for, again, that level of transparency, because that then carries through to follow-up meetings. One of the key components to this, I think I was able to touch on it with a couple of the board members as we were going through it, and just wanted to bring it up as a key piece, is oftentimes the question comes up, and I could do a whole nother presentation on this piece, but the question comes up of, okay, well, which scenario do we pick? What's the option that we all pick? Is it Damien's favorite? Is it the facilitation team's favorite? Is it Rod's? We actually have a program that we've developed in-house that can help us do that more objectively, as opposed to it being subjective. So backing up one step, at the very beginning of this process, we'll set our baselines of what our functions and our physical needs of our buildings are. So physically, we'll talk about what it would cost to keep what we refer to as the status quo, just to keep the buildings up over the next 20 years. That's maintenance work, that's finish upgrades, it's small, maintenance type items. And there will be, probably several $1 million identified as that. And that's work that has to happen whether we do a facility plan or not. The other aspect is setting a functional baseline. And that's essentially grading each facility. We actually have a 96 question A through F questionnaire that we go through that, again, sets a baseline understanding of how that's functioning as a 21st century environment. Rating things like site access to flexibility of classrooms, things like that. So we then use those as our baseline. And as we look at any of the new scenarios, we're able to compare whatever the costs are over the lifetime, as well as that functional improvement. And that gives us another metric that's very objective, not where I like a certain grade level or what solution I think looks the best. It gives us another metric to be able to weigh them against. And that oftentimes allows people to look at it with that objective eye and see what would best serve students over the life of that master plan implementation. So yeah, that's kind of the overview. I know that we were able to introduce this to most of the board last week. So yeah, open to questions, feedback, further discussion. Rod, I don't know if did I miss any key points or components that.
I think that was great.
Damian, what sort of timeline are you thinking of from when this kicks off?
Yeah, so when we're looking at facility planning, no matter what district I'm working with, it really all backs up to when you can implement something. We have time right now, in reality, because 2021 only has one referenda window, and that's in the spring, which is, in our opinion, is too close for the depth that we need to go into. So in reality, it's looking at a spring of 22. And please note, I'm not saying this with some knowledge that I think we're going to do a referenda. That's just the way as we plan facility planning, that's what we have to target towards. Because the last thing we want to do is straddle a vote opportunity to be able to implement something one way or the other. So backing up from that, that gives us plenty of time. So our thoughts are that we were able to get the facilitating team together, this fall, working towards the new year. Then we're able to really kind of jump off with those community meetings, really studying different solutions, starting to dive into some of the big questions with district finance, with properties, with curriculum, growth of the district, all those types of big questions, and starting to get a good feel for how they align and affect different facility plans. That would then allow for that to happen in the spring. Summer, we usually kind of pull back. You're not going to get community members wanting to come out to, spend 2 hours talking about district facilities in the middle of July. So we kind of take a step back. We're able to regroup as a facilitation team and make sure that we're answering the right questions. And then that allows us to come back in the fall and start to do kind of a deeper dive and look closer at just facility solutions at that point, because we've done kind of some of the background homework to get us to a kind of common understanding in the spring. So in reality, the timing is great if we can get going this fall. I don't feel we'd be rushing anything, as we start moving through the spring, and then into next fall, looking at the kind of the finality of the planning. And also, Ken, we don't necessarily have kind of meeting schedules set up yet, because that's part of what the facilitation team's kind of in charge of, of helping us to understand how frequently we feel we should be going to the community, what the format of those are. Is it a in-person meeting once a month, but then there are intermediate virtual opportunities for the similar type of presentation and feedback in between those? That'll affect some of that scheduling. And honestly, we haven't crafted that yet because we want the group to help author that. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Hey, Max and Merle, did we utilize an outside firm when we did the planning for MPE?
We did not. No. I guess my thought would be this is, we really need some direction and some input from the community on which way the community wants us to go at this point. You know, probably what we need to do with facilities, well, there's no probably. What we need to do with facilities needs to include some way to address the junior high. There's various ways to do that, and we need to see what the community is supportive of. So that's why there'd be a different approach this time.
And Ken, one of the key goals of this would not just be about solving we all know that we have a junior high space and, use issue. That wouldn't be our sole focus. We really want this to be a holistic 20 to 30 year plan where it's not necessarily, the timeline of MPE to the next phase. It's, what are the next 3 phases? Because in a lot of ways, there could be funds and reallocation of buildings that we might plan for today. It may not come to fruition, the last phase, but at least we have a direction so that as Steve decides to start putting dollars to a Lincoln Trail or to a certain wing of the high school, we understand where that meets the overall plan. So while this does have a very urgent or a very current need, I would say, with the junior high as a subject, we'd be looking at it from an even higher level to understand how they line up, for the long term.
Hey, Damien, one of the things we talked about, this is Megan, I don't know if you can hear me, I'm having internet issues, can you hear me?
I can see, yep.
Thanks. Was what this might cost the district. Did you guys have a chance to put some numbers together so that we could budget for this project?
Yeah, so my understanding is we're going to talk about this at the work session in October, potentially. I'll get a proposal before you act. Tonight's not an action, it's just discussion. But in essence, what we've been able to do, we actually work with Rod on retainer. And with the understanding that we weren't going to be able to, that the district wasn't going to be able to move forward with the facilitation that was looked at in the spring that Lindsay was mentioning. As community member and as a district architect, I felt it very important that we need to look at planning in this manner. So I'm not seeing that our costs total are going to be over about $20,000. And I'll send a proposal that outline exactly what that means. But we're essentially taking what Rod was going to be able to provide as far as the engagement efforts, take that really under our umbrella, and then in a way add to that the facility study piece that wasn't really a focus initially, but seems to be a tangible item that really has some need in the district. But yeah, so it's 2 pieces. One, we're taking Rod's costs under our wing, and we're looking at probably a ceiling of $20,000.
Okay, and you said that this is on the agenda for the study session in October, is that what you said?
There have been discussion of potentially talking about it more if we needed. Which I guess what I'm getting at is I don't have a proposal for you to look at tonight, but I will before you act.
Thank you.
As an action. Yep.
Great, thanks.
Sorry, it was a busy end of the week last week. Sorry.
No worries, I get it. I just was wondering. We talked about it, so I just wanted to follow up. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So the draft of the charge is just that, it's draft and not sure that it's in its final state. So one thought would be to have further discussion at the October 5th study session so that that draft could be shaped to the way that board members want to see it.
That would be my recommendation following tonight, that we look at that draft of the charge, which is kind of the parameters that we want that task force to address. That we look at that at our study session in October, then this would be back on the agenda in our regular October business meeting. Other questions for Damien or Rob?
No, I appreciate the call and the opportunity to talk. So thanks for doing that.
Quite welcome.
So Damon and Rob, thanks for being here tonight. Board members, what I'd encourage you to do is look at that draft that was sent out, the charge that kind of talks about the parameters. And that we will discuss that at the October study session. And then I'll talk to Rod. I don't know if Rod will be with us that night or not, maybe, as we work our way through the charge. And then and Damon will work on a more concrete proposal. And then the thought would be to take action on the 21st or 19th, whatever date that is.
19.
19. Okay. But certainly spend some time on it at the study session.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm actually gonna stay on for the HLS amendment just because I'm sure there are going to be exceptions. But
All right, Ron, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay, good night.
Bye, Jody. Thanks
see you,
for
Ron.
coming.
Thanks.
All right, item 7, moments of understanding with the MSEA, evaluation and paid administrative absence. Dr. Hall.
It's like a memorandum of understanding.
Memorandum.
Moments of understanding.
It might be moments.
I'm getting tired evidently, so I apologize.
All right, well,
Memorandum of understanding.
These two MOUs are the result of meetings and collaborative conversation with our teachers union, and they address teacher evaluation for this year as well as paid administrative absences, which provides a safety net of sorts in case there are absences beyond what could be considered normal due to COVID-19, possible COVID-19 reasons. So very happy that we could come to an agreement with the MSEA on this and recommend approval by the board.
Okay, the superintendent recommends approval of these. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Questions? Anything?
The only thing I didn't understand is the prior to having a child. PPA cannot be used prior to the diagnosis or impact of COVID, e.g., prior to having a child.
That's in there because you can use FFCRA prior to having a child if you are doctor ordered to be in quarantine prior to the birth of a child. But we did not want paid administrative absence to be used for that purpose. It's not likely that it would, but felt that covered all bases. FFCRA stands for Family First Corona Relief Act. That was really done.
Okay.
I knew that.
Other questions or comments?
So if anyone is quarantined because they have COVID, then this would apply to them.
Yes.
What about if their child was quarantined because they got COVID at school and then they had to stay home with their child?
Yes.
And this MOU, the length of the agreement is just this school year. If we're still having to deal with this next year, would we extend it or have more discussions?
I think that we would just revisit it if we needed to continue it.
Looks like it expires 2022 to 2023 school year.
Well, the teacher evaluation one is a little more complicated because
Oh yeah, teacher.
It
Right.
can't just apply just to this year because of the teachers are on an evaluation cycle. So we would, these are out there and we would just continue to talk about these as needed with the MSEA. Interestingly, today, as an aside, the State Board of Education did come out with a statement saying that They understood the need to perhaps not do evaluations, even though they were still recommending that teacher evaluations be done, but that there is, would not be the seeking of any kind of regulatory action by ISB if you did not do teacher evaluations. So that was good. That supports this with the understanding that this is just a good thing to do for this year, not only for teachers, but for our administrators who evaluate.
Can I ask another question about the PAA? What if a person is exposed to COVID outside of school and needs to quarantine?
We have not delineated between where people are exposed, and under FFCRA, I mean, it's just not, that's not the kind of, path we're going down with people. We certainly would hope that that wouldn't happen to anybody, and certainly can happen accidentally, but we also hope that people make wise choices about where they're at outside of school. But
Sure, no, that makes sense.
Any other question or comments? Roll call vote, please.
Schultz,
Yes?
Giles,
Yes.
Larson,
yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. Item 8, health, life, safety amendment boilers at high school.
So we are just asking, this is just for an approval of the process to put in a health, life, safety amendment. You've got to get pre-approval before you spend that money, and so the amendment is what provides that approval in the health, life, safety. So we do have some boilers at the high school that are in need of replacement. We think that some of that work might need to start before the summer of 2021, but the only thing being approved tonight is just saying that we want to allocate that money for the replacement of the boilers, and then we'll get to work on when and the timing of it and the urgency. We would not have to do them all at one time, is my understanding. They could go in stages. So this is just the approval of the authorization to actually direct BLDD architects to file a health, life, safety amendment in the amount of $420,000.
So we want to apply for health, life, safety. So when we do the work, which we're not authorizing yet,
right,
we can use health, life, safety when it comes to that. Okay. Is there a motion to do that?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second, Mark.
Is there discussion and questions?
Do we
David
know,
is here if we need them.
question about how old these boilers may be, do we know?
Old.
Here's my understanding.
That's all boilers will work?
Depends on the boiler, depends on the usage.
I think I might have been on board at some time when we had.
I'm thinking I was already around for a rebuild or something on these at one point.
Okay.
Clear back.
I would have to go confirm documentation, but my understanding is 10 to 12 years.
Wow.
Before we have.
And how much was I know this is, we're approving BLD to find out, but how many boilers would we be looking at? You might have said that already and I went over my head for the 420.
There's 4 boilers at the
4.
high school.
Okay.
So this is, the 420 reference here would be all 4.
Okay, thank you.
You know, it's been clearly at least 10 or 12 years. I remember back when I was pretty new to the board. We had no sales tax money back then. And we were looking for inexpensive ways to keep things working, because our financial condition back then was much worse than it is now. And it seems to me, we'd have to look, but it seems to me we rebuilt or something. We did not, I don't think we place, I can't remember, but
Yeah, I don't have any.
whatever we did, it involved the most inexpensive option available. I can guarantee you that.
And just one point, we feel that the figures we put towards it's conservative, but it allows us that authorization. So at the end of the project, whenever it occurs, the authorization lasts for 2 years. At the end of it, Heather and I fill out paperwork that essentially says what we actually spent on it, and then that's the amount that's authorized, through an audit that actually transfers fund to fund. This just gives us the opportunity to.
So you're thinking we may spend less than this?
That's our hope, yeah. And again, part of the, I guess, urgency is that we do know the boilers at some point might have issues. The state also has just had a major turnover in personnel, and giving them as much possible time to approve it is in our best interest.
Logical.
Yes, appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions? Roll call vote, please.
Keith,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. Item 9, temporary, we'll get temporary transfer and permanent transfer. Heather, talk to us about the temporary transfer.
Okay, again, this is just precautionary, but temporary transfers throughout the year is just due to cash flow. So say, for example, we do not, we continue to be delayed in our property taxes.
Right.
Even if I don't show it even if I show the negatives on our reports, that's considered temporary transfer. So in the rules, basically, we can't do unauthorized temporary transfer. So if anything goes negative at any time, we need to have approval to use the other funds to pay our bills.
Okay.
So that's just for cash flow. So I'm recommending approval so that we can consistently use our funds to pay our bills throughout the year, no matter what cash flow is at the time.
And the temporary transfer is an annual item. We typically approve this each year.
Yes.
So we have the ability to transfer if and when we need it.
Yes.
And I think it's fair that right now with the inconsistency coming from the county treasurer's office, it could be more necessary to have the authorization to do temporary transfers now. Okay, so that's the temporary transfer motion. Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second to approve the resolution for temporary transfers out of the working cash fund. Questions for Heather? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Giles,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. Item 10, permanent transfers resolution. Heather?
Okay, and these will be done as needed. So this is basically, again, another precautionary item. If for any reason at the end of the year, we do not have the funds, for example, right now, we're showing, 110,000 that we would not have. I can do permanent transfers from the working cash fund to cover these, any deficiencies. This is very conservative, so I really don't think I'm gonna be doing permanent transfers of these amounts, but just in case, I'd like to have that option.
And you're reserving the option to transfer to education up to 200, O&M up to 460, and transportation up to 150.
Yes.
You could do less than that or none of that.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve those transfers?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion on those? Roll call vote, please.
Larson,
I'm sorry, was there a question?
My question was just why wouldn't we wait until the end of the year and then pass this if we needed to?
It's just basically so that it is already done and it's precautionary, so that to make sure that we have the money, in our accounts at the end of the year.
Basically just being prepared, I think.
Yes, it's just being prepared for the end of the year. And I'm not gonna do a transfer that I don't have to do.
But also keeps us from using working cash for other purposes.
Yes.
Because we're gonna keep that handy.
Yes. So it basically puts it back in our reserve for this next year, not knowing. And, basically, the money in education, I highly doubt we're going to need now that the grant was approved. The O&M, that's all depending on what else we can get covered through other grants. And transportation is basically due to the fact that our reimbursement claim was down this last year.
Transportation is probably the most likely to happen.
Yes.
I would say.
Yes, our claim was down, and as I told you guys before, because of the allocation of mileage.
Okay. Other questions for Heather? Roll call, please.
Larson,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Giles,
Yes.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our agenda for the evening. There is no need for a closed session.
Before we
So,
go, can I'd just like to ask a question before we go, if that's possible?
yep.
So I'm just trying to understand that your position is that the land entity transfer between our two governmental entities does not require a 2/3 majority of the board?
I'm saying that passing both of the agreements we did tonight require a majority vote according to our attorneys, and that is what we have. For the transfer of 13 acres, there needs to be one more resolution, which will come back next month. My understanding is that will need a two-thirds or two-thirds vote.
Five votes.
Five votes in favor for that to pass. If it doesn't, we won't transfer 13 acres completely to the village.
So with the Conway Farms one, your position is that this is an easement that doesn't transfer any land ownership?
That's not my position, that's the position of the attorneys who wrote and are advising us.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Now, we can talk more about 13 acres next month. My opinion is it makes a whole lot more sense for the village to own it than it does us. But we can talk more about that at that time. All right, everybody, thanks for being here. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion on adjournment. Roll call vote, please.
Hennessy,
Yes?
Schultz,
Yes.
Keith, Giles,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes. Thanks for being here. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
I didn't want to skip that.